Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And what a lovely story this is too. 3 adult women going to the fair, about to have their fortune read. And I wonder where that's going to lead. But before we continue with our story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 2 of our story tonight. Fern was so excited, her entire body shook like the branches of a tree, blown in a light breeze. Imagine if this woman tells me I'm going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger who's going to whisk me off into the sunset, she giggled. That would be so amazing, so amazing. I've had so little luck with men over the last couple of years. But maybe this Prt2of4 will give me some hope for my beleaguered future. Reassure me kindly that I'm not going to be miserably single for the rest of my entire life. Believe me, sometimes I wonder if my lot in life is to be a lonely old cat lady, looking after hundreds of cats, and smelling like one too. As the way things are heading, that's the way my life is going, let me tell you. And I'm not exaggerating. Oh, please, Fern, you are exaggerating, and you know it. You being a lonely old cat lady with hundreds of cats to look after? I don't think so. That would never, ever happen to you, said Anthea, shaking her head. But that could be my story, and I admit it. If my pathetic dating life is anything to go by, that is. The last man I dated took me to an extravagant restaurant, and I thought I was in 7th heaven. I really did. And then when it came to paying, he discovered he'd left his wallet behind. So I paid for absolutely everything, and it cost an absolute fortune. That meal practically crippled me. He assured me he would reimburse me, but I never heard a dicky bird from him again. It was so typical. My bet is he goes on dates with women all over the country and gets free meals everywhere he goes. Well, I admit you've had some bad luck with men, Fern agreed. But maybe the gypsy fortune teller will change all that. Maybe she'll tell us there's a gorgeous man waiting for us in the wings. I hope you're right, said Anthea, but I wouldn't be too confident about that. It was Brooke who was shaking her head madly as she stared at the lengthening queue of people that was now standing outside the gypsy's tent. She shuddered. There's no way I'm going in there. No way. Why the hell not, Brooke? Asked Fern, looking exasperated. She could see by the disquieted expression on Brooke's face that she didn't like the idea of participating in this fun experience, and there were times that Brooke was predisposed to being a wet blanket. I just don't want to go in there, said Brooke, her voice dropping to a muted whisper. If we don't hear what we want to hear, what about that? Have you thought about that for a second? Imagine if this Prt2of4 says that one of us is going to have a car crash or die of a deadly disease. Do you really want to know about that? Brooke instinctively regretted the words that had rolled off her tongue so freely, for she realised she sounded as neurotic as her mother. But she couldn't help the way she was feeling. Luckily for Brooke, her 2 best friends were used to her being downbeat about so many things and always having such a bleak outlook. They believed they'd probably be much the same way, as Brooke was in temperament, if the Bordeauxs happened to be their parents, for privately they had confided together that they had never met 2 more depressed people as Jonas and Samantha Bordeaux, who looked as if they were permanently carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. Even their own parents were very reluctant to invite the Bordeauxs over for a dinner or a family event, as Samantha Bordeaux would go on and on about deadly diseases that you could easily contract, and all kinds of horrific things you don't want to discuss over the dinner table when you happen to be entertaining your friends. They were the kind of people who seemed to worry about everything and nothing. Fern remembered a time very explicitly when she'd caught a very mild cold, and Mrs. Bordeaux had overreacted and told her she was certain she had pneumonia. You don't look good, Fern, dear, Mrs. Bordeaux had said very gravely, insisting on taking Fern's temperature and phoning her parents to tell them that their daughter was in a grave condition and they needed to take her to hospital at once. Fern's parents had almost had a heart attack, But when they picked up their daughter from the Bordeaux household, they realised that her cold was just a common cold, and that there was nothing serious about her condition. So Mrs. Bordeaux was far too dramatic about so many things, and people were used to the Bordeauxs being like that. Fern shrugged her shoulders nonchalantly. Honestly, Brooke, you do get your knickers in a twist, don't you? You're just like your parents. You worry too much about everything. Honestly, believe it or not, I do think the future for us all is bright. Besides all that, I'm certain there's a code of ethics that the gypsy abides by. Because if there wasn't, she wouldn't exactly make a lot of money, and people wouldn't want to go back to her. People don't exactly go and visit a fortune teller to be told that in the morning they're going to be run over by a bus. The gypsy knows that. She's not a complete idiot, you know. If she believed you were going to leave her tent after the fortune-telling and drop down dead, she'd hardly tell you that that was going to happen, even if she knew it. There's some things you just don't do. Don't joke about such things, Fern, said Brooke, her face darkening. You could be tempting fate. Do you know how dangerous it is to tempt fate? My mother told me once about this guy. He was in a bad state financially. He phoned up his insurance company and decided to stop paying his life insurance just for a couple of months. Then he was going to resume payment when he got a bit richer. The next day he dropped down dead. His poor family was left with nothing. That's what tempting fate does. You should never tempt fate and say that this is not going to happen and that is not going to happen, because when you say that, the very thing you believed won't happen does happen. It's like an albatross around your neck. And I'm not joking about it either. Oh, come on, Brooke. Lighten up, will you? Said Anthea, interceding. I think it would be cool to go and see the gypsy fortune teller. It's probably all nonsense anyway. But that's all part of the fun, isn't it? That's why we came to the fair today, to enjoy ourselves, to let our hair done, to be children again. We've tried everything today that's on offer. Although there's nowhere on God's earth I would go for a breast screening. But seeing a fortune teller, I think that's going to be cool. We don't have to believe a word of what she says, but it'll be a good experience, don't you think? I don't think it's going to be cool. I think it's a horrible thing to do. I don't want my fortune read. It feels wrong. None of us should know the future. Anthea grimaced. Brooke, listen to yourself. You take life so very seriously. It's just a bit of fun. Lighten up, will you? I blame your parents for this. Your mother always believes the worst is going to happen. Come on, let's do it. Let's boldly take the plunge. You only live once, you know. Brooke looked at the sign above the tent and finally shrugged her shoulders in resignation. A nasty chill ran down her spine, as if a silent voice was discouraging her to go into that red and white tent to have her fortune told. She didn't believe in these things anyway. Anthea was absolutely right. It was only a bit of harmless fun, wasn't it? So why was she so creeped out about the thought of going to have her fortune told by someone who claimed to be a real gypsy? For it scared her half to death. But both of her friends were mindlessly nonchalant about the whole thing. How she envied them for being so easygoing, so carefree, so insouciantly relaxed about their lives, never concerning themselves with deadly diseases or about crossing the road when the red light was flashing. Her friends took precarious risks and never came to any harm. But Brooke was always worried about what each day would hold, like her mother was. And she knew Althea was right. Her mother's morbidly dark influences over her life had stunted her hopes with so many doubts. Why couldn't she be more like her friends and take each day in its stride? Oh, come on, Brooke. I know you don't want to do this, but why don't you, for once in your life, live on the edge, take a risk, do something you wouldn't normally do? Said Anthea excitedly. She dragged Brooke into the line. Why do you look so serious, Brooke? You look so downcast. It's only a bit of fun. We're not going off to the execution chamber to have our heads chopped off, are we? If it makes you feel any better, I bet this woman isn't a real gypsy anyway. But even if she is the real deal, why are you freaked out about the thought of having your fortune read? I don't like the thought of someone telling me my future. It's creepy. Don't you think it's creepy?" "No, it's not creepy," said Fern, pulling a face. She looked at Brooke dubiously, shaking her head to express her disappointment in her friend. She hated the fact that Brooke could never chill out. She was always nervously looking over her shoulder, almost as if she was half expecting something terrible to happen to her. Even before they'd got to the fair, she had warned Fern and Anthea to watch their purses at all times, for there might be some dodgy characters lurking around the fairground. Fern wondered how anyone could live on their nerves like Brooke so obviously did. If she wasn't careful, she'd end up developing a panic disorder. "You know what, Brooke? You're such a good friend of ours, and we love you to death. But you worry about so many things. You take life so seriously. Why do you think we came to the fair today? To lighten up, to have a good time, not to think about all the depressing things you so often bring up with us. I want us to enjoy ourselves, to have some fun. We can't possibly leave this fair without having our fortunes read. But if you don't want to have yours read, fair enough. No one is forcing you to do anything you don't want to do." Brooke smiled. "You know what? You're right. I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to have my fortune read. I'm sounding so pessimistic. I'm just like my mother. And if I carry on this way, I'm going to become her. And I don't want that to happen. I guess I needed a push in the deep end. So yes, I will do it. I'll have my fortune read." "Good on you, girl. That's the spirit," said Fern, thumping Brooke on the back. "If you carry on being this bold, you'll never end up being like your mother." Brooke smiled. She loved being around Fern and Anthea, and their fun-loving natures certainly helped her calm down significantly. Of course, her friends were absolutely right. It was only a bit of fun, and she'd really be a spoilsport if she didn't go along with this, as she wanted to be involved in everything they did today at the fair. And maybe if she didn't have her fortune read, she would be missing out on a whole lot. "But I'd like to go first, if you don't mind," she said assertively, because she really wanted to get her session with the gypsy over and done with, so that she didn't have to stand there getting more and more flustered about the whole thing, as she continued to worry about what the gypsy was to tell her. It would be better to just take the bull by the horns right now, and dive straight into the deep end and be done with it. The tent was extremely dark and poky when Brooke pulled back the zip and entered the tent. She almost wanted to retreat from whence she'd come, but she managed to compose herself and steady her nerves. She heard a woman's voice saying, "Come in." A woman with hunched shoulders who was wearing a dark crochet shawl over her long wispy grey hair lifted a bony hand and waved it in the air, beckoning for Brooke to take a seat. Brooke was trembling. Her nerves jangled inside her, almost as if she was shaking her car keys very vigorously. Brooke sat down on the uncomfortable steel chair, which dug into her backside. A pair of dark hooded eyes were fixed on her, and they made her feel extremely awkward and conspicuous. The gypsy was elderly. She was very badly weathered by the sun. Her face was a road map of deeply entrenched wrinkles, which made her head look like a wizened, shriveled-up tortoise, so much so that her eyes seemed almost too big for her crinkled face. There was a crystal ball on the dark tablecloth, which might have been for show, for the women never used it at all. Brooke wasn't good at guessing ages, but this elderly woman could have been in her late 80s or even early 90s. She looked a little stooped over, as if her back was slightly hunched. Her shoulders were narrow, and Brooke was certain that if the gypsy was to stand up, she might be under 5 foot tall, for she appeared to be rather petite. The woman stretched out a bony cold hand that looked like a gnarled claw, as her hand was riddled with arthritis. There was some dirt wedged under the woman's chewed-up fingernails, which was a little off-putting. It smelt rather musty and damp in the tent, almost as if there was mildew somewhere, which wasn't desperately pleasant. "Please, can I look at your bum?" said the woman in clipped English. Her accent was very pronounced, but Brooke had no clue where the woman originated from, but she was definitely not American-born and bred for sure. Brooke had been clenching her hands together so tightly that they had sweated profusely. Reluctantly, she presented her open palm to the old woman. The gypsy wiped away the perspiration from her palm with a tissue which she rolled up into a ball and tossed into a nearby wastepaper basket, where there were dozens of other rolled-up pieces of tissue, which made Brooke wonder if the gypsy had been wiping dozens of sweaty palms this morning, of which hers was probably the very worst. Maybe other people were also secretly apprehensive about having their fortunes read, but they probably hid it well, unlike Brooke. The gypsy shook her head. "You trembling! You not want me to read your palm?" she said, peering at Brooke curiously, with a kind of frustrated expression, which actually suggested she was really saying, "Why are you here if you don't want me to read your fortune?" For she looked to be slightly impatient, as if she was used to time-wasters like Brooke, that she didn't appreciate and had seen enough of them in her time. Brooke managed a watery smile. "But of course I want you to read my palm," she said, extending her palm out generously. "It's just, I'm not used to this kind of thing," she tried to explain. "I've never had my palm read before." The gypsy said nothing to this, but her bony hand gripped Brooke's very tightly, spreading it out before her like a map that she wanted to read. Her eyes fixed on the lines on Brooke's palm. Brooke was really scared when the woman read it, for her eyes widened at one point, as she was doing the reading, and Brooke was absolutely certain the woman had foreseen something very, very bad in her future. She felt as if her privacy had been cruelly invaded, and that any secret she might have been nursing had been laid barren. It made her feel all the more vulnerable and self-conscious, for she did not know what the gypsy had discerned about her, and there was a part of her that genuinely did not want to know. "You need to be still," said the voice firmly, as Fern hadn't realized how much her hand was continuing to shake. "I can't read it. Your hand, if you shake so much." "Oh, I'm so sorry," said Brooke nervously. "I've never done this before, you see," she explained yet again. The dark eyes gave nothing away as they continued to study Brooke's palm. Brooke took in a deep breath to ease her rising level of trepidation. She was absolutely terrified of what the gypsy might tell her. Supposing the gypsy was to tell her she had 6 months left to live, or she'd developed motor neuron disease when she reached her 30s, or the man she could potentially marry one day was secretly a bigamist who had 3 other wives she knew nothing about. Or maybe one day she'd have her teeth knocked out in a dreadful accident when she fell on the ice. Or perhaps she'd become an unfortunate victim in a house invasion. All these wild, irrational scenarios began to play out in her head, like the script in a movie. She began to shake all the more. The gypsy's ice-cold claw-like hand, mottled with age spots, tried to anchor her firmly in place so that she didn't shift in her seat so erratically. "You are a teacher, I see," said the gypsy. "You teach young children. You are good at your job. It's what you are meant to do. It's what you call it. It's your vocation. You teach young children. Yes, very young children." Brooke's jaw dropped wide open. "Yes, that's right. I'm a teacher. I teach children, young children, between the ages of 6 and 7, to read and write." Brooke was stunned and impressed that the gypsy appeared to know this. The gypsy nodded, as if she didn't need Brooke to tell her this, for she knew the information already. She looked at Brooke's palm a little harder. Then she shut her eyes tightly. When she opened them again, her eyes became a cloudy, rather milky colour, which was the scariest, most creepy thing Brooke had ever seen before in her life. The gypsy's eyes rolled back in her sockets for a moment, and she suddenly said, I see. Something very bad, very, very bad, on your palm." "Oh no, you don't, do you?" asked Brooke. She felt as if her lungs were beginning to collapse in her chest, rather like a deflated beach ball. All this talk about gypsies never breaking their code of ethics was completely wrong. She had known instinctively that the gypsy would tell her something dreadful, something she didn't want to hear. She had trusted Fern in believing this whole reading would be nonchalant and relaxed, but now she was feeling her entire body tightening. "You see something bad happening. What is it?" she asked. "I see you not paying attention. I see you driving under the influence.
There is an accident, a road, a man. You must be careful, very careful. I see danger. I see potential death. You must be careful, for if this man dies, your future will not go as it is ordained. You must not mess up. You need to be cautious. You need to take the right path. You must not take the wrong one. And it will be easy for you to take the wrong one if you are not paying attention.
Am I going to die? Asked Brooke, snatching away her hand very quickly from the gypsy, her hazel eyes fixing with terror on the woman. I'm not going to die in a car wreck, am I? When you say I must be careful, you're not suggesting I would drink and drive, are you? I'd never do that, never. I'm a careful, very vigilant driver. You can ask anyone, except my mother, of course. It is not that you will die, but you could take someone's life if you are not careful. They have an exit point at this time, you see. And if you take that wrong path, you could potentially harm this person. You need to be careful. The gypsy was beginning to sound like Brooke's neurotic mother. Everywhere she went in life, she heard the mantra, be careful, and it was driving her crazy. It was like an indelible imprint that was left on her mind that could never be wiped away. The words, be careful, were haunting, but hearing them from this gypsy fortune-teller was utterly terrifying. She got the impression the gypsy was telling her that one day she'd drive under the influence of alcohol and literally go barreling into somebody else's car, killing them on impact so that they lost their lives before their due time. That would ultimately mean a prison sentence for her. Is that what the gypsy meant by her future wouldn't go as it was ordained? Because she'd be locked up in a prison cell for years and years, paying for her foolish conduct for the rest of her life? Brooke could imagine how her mother would react to this. Only this morning her mother had been going on and on at her about her driving being a little too ambitious, and Brooke being far too quick to put her foot down on the accelerator. Maybe coming to the gypsy fortune-teller meant she could ensure that this never ever happened. She could give up on alcohol immediately and take the advanced driving course that her mother had recommended. I'm not going to kill someone. Is that what you're saying? Brooke asked, her eyes widening in terror. Are you saying I'm going to have a head-on collision and kill a man? You misunderstand me. What I'm trying to tell you is that the lines on your hand suggest two paths. The path you take is your decision. The paths are not written in stone. You have the power to make the right choice. I have told you to be vigilant, to veer on the path of your destiny, of which this man that you could potentially kill will play an intrinsic part. If you do harm him, your life will take an altogether different course. You need to do what is right, said the gypsy. Now you must go. I cannot tell you any more at this time, for this is what serves you right now. Even if the gypsy had told Brooke anything else, she would likely not have heard a word of it, for the woman had said so many dreadful things to her, and it was all a frantic whirl. Had the gypsy implied she was going to kill someone in a fatal car crash? Please God, no. The gypsy had said there were two distinct paths in her life, one where she killed a man, probably in a head-on collision, while she was under the influence of alcohol. But that was not going to happen, for wild horses would ensure Brooke never drank a stitch of alcohol ever again. Brooke should not have listened to her friends. She should have listened to her gut instincts, warning her not to have her palm read. Now she'd opened a can of worms that was impossible to close. She worried enough in her life as it was, and now her worry would reach new heights. She had enjoyed a drink from time to time, and that little pleasure in her life that enabled her to relax was no longer even an option. She needed to ensure that the path the gypsy said she could potentially take could be averted at all costs, and from now on she would drive like a snail,
like her mother did, to ensure that she didn't so much as harm a fly.
"Aren't you glad you went to the palm reader?"
Fern asked Brooke excitedly.
"The woman was absolutely amazing. She was brilliant."
Brooke just nodded. Yes, she was good. How could she tell her friends that the palm reader had said she needed to be careful, as she might kill someone in a car accident? Her friends were always telling her that she had a glum approach towards life. She could only imagine what they would say if she was to share this with them. They'd probably think she was overreacting and taking what the gypsy had told her to heart. So it was best to keep these worries of hers under lock and key, and she would not share them, not even with her own mother. For if she did, Samantha Bordeaux would likely confiscate her car and tell her she couldn't ever drive again. Samantha Bordeaux believed in psychics and their ability to see the future. So if Brooke shared with her mother what had happened at the fair, her mother would quite literally fall apart at the seams and keep Brooke permanently indoors to ensure disaster never struck her down. But Brooke did not want to live like that. Fern was completely oblivious to Brooke's angst after the palm reading at the fair. She went on and on about the fortune teller.
"Oh my God, she was so brilliant. I'm not going to be a cat lady raising hundreds of cats as I believed I would. I'm not going to be lonely either. The fortune teller told me I'd meet a very nice man, and very soon too. She thinks he might possibly be an engineer. She sees me living in this area and having 3 kids. Oh, I can't imagine. I've always wanted children. She did suggest I might have a few fertility problems, but that I would definitely end up with 3 children." "Well, she told me I'd be a wealthy woman," said Anthea. "She told me that I'm going to come into a great deal of money through an inheritance or something. She says it's going to be a long while before I get married and settle down. But she does see me having a child, but only 1 child. But she says I'm going to, have that child later in life. A late lamb, so to speak." 1 year later, Fern's 28th birthday party had been a rip-roaring success as far as she was concerned, as everyone that had left that party that night had done so in good spirits, some singing happily to themselves, as many had drunk way too much and were more than a little inebriated. Fern had hired an excellent DJ for the event, the kind of guy that had an illustrious reputation for getting everyone on that dance floor dancing the night away. There had been pig on the spit, served with a vast selection of delicious salads that had been spread out on the dining room table, indoors, along with other delectable snacks. When Brooke had arrived at the party, she had been as stiff as a cardboard doll, wearing a desolate expression on her face that suggested she wished she wasn't there, as she knew, being teetotal that night, and being the only party pooper, by not drinking, it would be difficult to get into the spirit of the occasion. She'd probably, as a result, have a very dull time. For a whole year since her reading with the gypsy, she hadn't touched a drop of alcohol, and she secretly longed for a glass of wine. But she knew 1 glass would lead to another, and then another, and another, because that's what always happened when you enjoyed a good glass of wine. And she couldn't allow that to happen, so she hadn't an option. She couldn't drink. Brooke was happy to be at her friend's 28th birthday party, of course, but she did find it extremely difficult to relax, as ever since the event at the fair, when she had received that palm reading by the gypsy, she could think of little else. When Brooke had arrived at the party, she had been as stiff as a cardboard doll, wearing what could only be described as a desolate, forsaken expression on her face that suggested she wished she wasn't there. She knew that the reason why she was unhappy to be here was because she was teetotal, and she'd obviously be the only party pooper tonight, not drinking and getting into the spirit of the occasion, and as a consequence would probably have an extremely dull time. For a whole year since her palm reading with the gypsy, she hadn't dared touch a drop of alcohol, and she secretly longed for a glass of wine. But she knew that 1 glass would ultimately lead to another and another, and she knew it was not even an option to drink. She couldn't take the risk. Brooke was happy to be at her friend's 28th birthday party, but she found it very difficult to relax these days, as ever since the event at the fair, when she'd received that palm reading by the gypsy there, she could think of little else than the possibility that she could potentially take the wrong path, which would ultimately lead to a catastrophic car accident. So her driving these days was very, very cautious, and she'd taken her mother's advice and gone on that advanced driving course, which had done very little to inspire her confidence, for she was constantly nervously looking over her shoulders, wondering when something quite dreadful would happen. It would seem she had become almost as neurotic as her mother was. She had come to Fern's party feeling a little dejected, as she'd liked to have enjoyed a few glasses of wine with her friends, and let her hair down for a change, for alcohol had done wonders in relaxing her. But after her interaction with that gypsy, she swore she'd never drink a drop of alcohol ever again. Although she had never shared with her two best friends why she had very suddenly become teetotal. And both Fern and Anthea had been befuddled by Brooke's resistance to drink, because these days, as a consequence, she had become a whole lot more intense and less fun to be around. When Brooke arrived at the party looking gorgeous in her black sparkly dress and strappy silver high heels, she had stolen the show. She was a very attractive young woman, but sadly she looked as uncomfortable in this social setting as a fish thrown out of its goldfish bowl, as even at the best of times, Brooke had never really enjoyed large social gatherings, without indulging in alcohol to iron away her inhibitions. So being here, without drinking a thing, was not her idea of a good time. Fern had noticed that Philip Joubert, a handsome young man, whom had known them for years growing up, could not keep his eyes off Brooke. You could see for a mile off. He was completely intoxicated by her. But he'd secretly been nursing a crush on her for years, as far back as when they were kids riding their bicycles around the local area. The problem was that only Brooke appeared completely oblivious to her secret admirer, that had clandestinely admired her from a distance, but never seemed able to do anything about it. Even Philip's own friends had told him to get some balls and go for the plunge and ask Brooke out, but he'd never been able to do this. "What's your problem, bro?" they would tease him. "What's the worst thing that could happen? She can say no, and then you just move on." "I just can't ask her," Philip had said. "You don't understand. She's the only girl for me." "Look, bro, I hate to blow your bubble, but there are other fish out in the sea," he was told. It would seem that Philip Joubert, who had so much going for him, as he ran his own successful business and was a flamboyant entrepreneur, who drove a bright yellow Lexus and was incredibly good-looking to boot, when it came to his love life, his shyness to make any advances towards Brooke, whom he had wished to marry one day, had kept him anchored to the same mooring place for years and years. Everyone was getting into the spirit of the occasion, tucking into delicious snacks that had been placed out on the table in the dining room by Fern's very attentive mother, who had spared no expense for this party when it came to providing the most lavish spread. People could help themselves to whatever they fancied, and the delicious scent of the pig on the spit cooking outside sent its savoury aromas throughout the house, so people quickly became hungry and gluttonously tucked into massive platefuls of this juicy, very succulent roasted meat that was so tender it fell off the fork when you ate it. There was a help-yourself bar on the lawn, where you could ply yourself with about as much alcohol as you desired, and there was also a dance floor on the patio, which overlooked the turquoise swimming pool. People were bopping away merrily to the music, and laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air, but no one seemed to be brave or adventurous enough to go swimming, as there was indeed a slight nip in the air. Fern looked a little out of place sitting on one of those swing chairs that overlooked the swimming pool, with her hand tightly clasping a glass of Coca-Cola. She looked utterly miserable, as her downward smile was doing her no favours, and with a look like that on her face, Fern doubted that Philip Joubert would ever pluck up the courage to ask Brooke out. When Fern had confided in Brooke once that she genuinely believed that Philip Joubert had a crush on her, Brooke had laughed at the very idea, and brushed such a preposterous suggestion away, like the dog hairs off a coat, for she believed the idea was completely ridiculous. "I've known him for years, Fern," she had said in a clipped no-nonsense tone of voice. "If that guy liked me, I think I'd know about it, don't you? And besides, he'd have asked me out a long time ago. Not necessarily, said Fern. I've seen the way he looks at you, Brooke. I believe he's been smitten over you for years. But I think he's shy, too shy to ask you out. Brooke had shrugged her shoulders. I think I'd know if Philip Joubert liked me. If a man likes you, he looks at you, doesn't he? Philip never looks at me when I talk to him. But that's because he's shy, you little nitwit. Do you like him? Fern had asked her. I mean, if he asked you out, would you be interested? Well, I've always liked Philip, came Brooke's rather prompt reply. But if she liked him romantically, she had given nothing away. But Fern had a gut feeling that Brooke had always secretly liked Philip romantically, but was too proud to admit her true feelings. Fern took Althea to one side at the party and said, I know Brooke is refusing to drink alcohol these days. She's become all the more miserable. I mean, look at her, sitting there on the swing chair, looking like she's waiting in a dental reception for a root canal treatment. I wish she hadn't come to my party if she's going to look like this. It's so obvious she doesn't want to be here. And I'm worried she's going to ruin the mood of the party for everybody else. If anybody hangs around her, they'll want to leave the party. I don't want her ruining it for me. She's in such a cranky mood, don't you think? You're right, said Althea. She does look miserable. In the past, she'd always enjoy a glass of wine or something, and it helped her unwind. But now she looks pretty unapproachable. I very much doubt that Philip Joubert is ever going to have the courage to ask Brooke out. He hasn't been able to keep his eyes off her all evening, I notice. Well, good luck to him, said Fern, because if I were a man, I'd keep the hell away from the likes of Brooke. When she's wearing a boot face in particular, I don't think she has any idea how bad it looks to sit there looking so miserably unhappy on the chair. I have half a mind to tell her to just go straight home and not to be bothered with my party. I blame those parents of hers, said Anthea. I mean, she's so cool when she unwinds. But tonight she pretty much looks like a saber-toothed tiger with an agonizing toothache. I want her to enjoy herself at your party, Fern. I can't bear her to look so glum like this. Remember how happy-go-lucky she was at the fair last year, until we visited the fortune-teller's tent. Since then she's become dreadfully serious over everything. What can we do to loosen her up a little? I've just had a brilliant idea. I can't believe I didn't think of it before, said Fern, with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. We know Brooke loosens up when she has a bit of alcohol in her system, so that's what we need to do. She becomes easy-going and chilled. She's a pleasure to be around. I like her after she's had a glass of wine or something. We could slip some vodka into the non-alcoholic punch and give it to her, insisting that there's no alcohol in it. She won't know any better. You can't taste vodka. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. But we'll have to insist on driving her home tonight. Or she could, of course, stay over and go home in the morning. But I think getting her a little sloshed will do her the world of good, and she'll end up having an amazing time. So there we are. That is the end of part 2. Part 3 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.